Hello, peace be upon you, and happy Saturday, and I'm hoping you're having a beautiful Saturday. And welcome to AROPL Balkans Daily News. It has become more of a maybe more weekly news, but I'll be try to be coherent. Man, I will basically be presenting the news from the wider region of Balkans, Slovenia and its neighbors. So don't take my word for it. I will present more news from various sources. So please try to follow me, and of course you can always comment, you can always drop a critic under the comments, maybe talk about it on AROPL Balkans live shows, when I'm live on TikTok from here and there. Right now I'm off this show because I basically have dedicated myself as far as the digital and analog productions goes, more of documentaries, audio productions and these type of things. So I go live from here to there, but don't search for me, or even try to tell me, you somebody, you should be there, you should be in this type of shows and that type of shows. I mean, look, if somebody wants to invite me to a show, he of course can, and we can talk about it free, nicely debate. And of course, if everybody is being polite, we can of course be in a show together. But otherwise, I'm not interested to be in any show whatsoever, especially if it's some, I don't know, TikTok, I don't know, argumental, I'm better than you show. I'm not interested in it. So without further ado, I will start reading the news. So this one is from 31st of January 2026. It's called The Last Line of Defense. So this news is in English. Otherwise, we have news in Slovenian and the dialects of the Balkans region, but today we will have it in English, that maybe because it's from wider region, so everybody understands that. They don't say, I didn't understand, maybe, or I have trouble, could you put subtitles? So I'm talking in English that basically everybody understands me. I hope I'm being clear about it. Thank you. And it's called The Collapse of the Dayton Accords. I think I already read this news, but this was basically on the 31st. I think this was the beginning of the wider, events that follow one another. So maybe it's good to read this news again. So it's about the political conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina has reached a new level. In Banja Luka, officials are openly talking about breaking the fundamental agreements on which the entire post-war system of the country rests. The leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Milorad Dodik, stated that Republika Srpska may withdraw from the Dayton Accords. The reason is the action of the court and prosecutor's office of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which are viewed in RS as instrument of pressure on the indigenous population. According to him, these institutions have turned into a noose around the neck of the Serbian people, and the right to withdraw from Dayton must be used while it still formally exists. So what triggered this? The verdict against Vojin Pavlović. So the court of Bosnia and Herzegovina sentenced the head of the quote-unquote Eastern Alternative Association to 3 years in prison for displaying a banner congratulating General Ratko Mladić on his birthday. The case of Milorad Malic, the activist was convicted for participating in a rally in Banja Luka, where he held photographs of the first president of Republika Srpska, Radovan Karadžić, and former RS army commander Ratko Mladić. Then it was the reaction in Republika Srpska. Both verdicts were viewed in Banja Luka as examples of selective justice and an attempt to narrow Serbian political and historical identity through criminal prosecution. And then was the 1995 Dayton Accords ended the war but created a fragile structure. So two entities, a weak central government and external governance via the illegitimate office of the High Representative. In recent years the balance has shifted. The judiciary and international structures are increasingly interfering in RS internal affairs. Further pressure on Republika Srpska through courts and prosecutors undermines the very foundation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. If the confrontation continues, the country risks moving from a managed crisis to open institutional collapse. Then we have the Balkan Trail in the Epstein files. A sexual predator, Jeffrey Epstein, is dead, but his legacy continues to shake global elites. A new batch of declassified US Department of Justice documents, which is 3 million pages, 180,000 photos, 2,000 videos, has recently highly scandalous connections reaching as far as the Balkans. Maybe John Farrell, but I wouldn't know about that. Two figures appear in the Balkan episode. So, the first one is Milo Djukanovic, former president of Montenegro, who ruled the country for about 30 years and has long been associated with corruption and smuggling, whom Epstein called, quote-unquote, a cool guy. And the second one is Miroslav Lajčák, which is former Slovak foreign minister and current EU special representative for the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue, who maintained active correspondence with Epstein. How about that? In 2016, while in Montenegro, Lajčák sent Epstein photos and enthusiastic messages, quote-unquote, I told you Montenegro is cool, unquote. Epstein asked whether Djukanovic was prime minister or president. The correspondence also included jokes that Djukanovic could, quote-unquote, give Donald Trump asylum, unquote, who at the time was facing lawsuits. After the correspondence was published, Lajčák hastily resigned as advisor to Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, claiming he, quote-unquote, knew nothing about Epstein's crimes. Djukanovic, as expected, denies everything. So the Balkans once again find themselves at the epicenter of behind-the-scenes intrigue. While European diplomats pretend they, quote-unquote, weren't aware and long-standing local politicians brush off accusations, Epstein's shadows continues to hang over the region, reminding everyone of the real mechanism of influence and control. Let's go further. A path to checkmate. A new political course in Bulgaria. Former Bulgarian President Rumen Radev, who resigned on January 19, officially confirmed plans to create a new political party and participate in snap parliamentary elections in spring 2026. In an interview with Panorama, Radev explained that the law does not allow registering a new party before elections, so he will use an existing registration or coalition announcing his project after the vote. Radev is known for statements diverging from EU and NATO lines. He criticized anti-Russian sanctions, arms supplies to so-called Ukraine, and opposed Bulgaria's accessions to Donald Trump's Council of Peace, quote-unquote, stating the decision lacked parliamentary approval. In 2025, Radev became a key figure opposing Euro adoption, proposing a referendum rejected by Parliament. During November protests, he openly sided with demonstrators and called for the resignation of Prime Minister Rosen Željazko. Today, Radev retains one of the highest approval ratings in the country, which is around 47%, and remains the only politician capable of partly consolidating society and breaking the cycle of snap elections and permanent crisis. Creating his own party and Radev's potential rise to power could significantly reshape Bulgarian politics. His anti-corruption rhetoric and emphasis on sovereignty resonate with voters tired of instability and external dictates. So, this is about Bulgaria, so let's see further what we have up on the menu. The EUQ, a reminder for quote-unquote free riders. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani stated in an interview with Corriere della Sera that Balkan countries should join the European Union before so-called Ukraine. According to him, Rome continues to support Ukraine's European integration, but obligations to Balkan candidates come first, and this is priority for Europe. The Western Balkans countries have spent decades in the EU quote-unquote waiting room. fulfilling complex requirements and undergoing painful reforms, which traditionally considers the region within its sphere of influence, advocates accelerating their integration, and Italians are not alone in their skepticism regarding Ukraine's fast-track sanctions. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Ukraine's rapid entry into EU is impossible even by 2027. Leaders of Poland and Austria share a similar view. So Italy is backing words with actions. On March 3rd, 2026, Rome will host a meeting of the Friends of the Balkans, quote-unquote, March 3rd. Mark that down. Friends of the Balkans. Friends of the Balkans in Rome, March 4th, 2026. An initiative aimed at revitalizing EU enlargement toward the Western Balkans. On April 1st, 2026, Tajani and German Minister Johann Wadephul will visit Belgrade to, quote-unquote, send a signal of support to Serbia, unquote. This demonstrates Italy's intention to cement its influence in the region. Tajani's statement is a reminder that EU enlargement should be based on merit, not geopolitical expediency. At the same time, Italy seeks to strengthen its influence in the Balkans. Let's go further. Security forces versus authorities. Expansion of the protest. A major protest will take place today in Novi Sad, organized by representatives of the security and legal community, judges, prosecutors, investigators, etc. In response to the adoption of the so-called Mrdić laws, the Bar Association, local students and citizens will also join. The Mrdić laws, named after MP Uglješa Mrdić, were adopted by Parliament on January 28th and signed by President Vučić on January 30th, 2026. Passed under an expedited procedure, they sparked intense criticism both domestically and abroad. So the main objections were dismantling the prosecutor's office for organized crime, the laws effectively abolishing TOK, which handled high-profile cases such as the Novi Sad canopy collapse, the demolition of the General Staff building, and the Veljko Beligu clan. These cases may now be buried or revised under new leadership. This case is interesting. It gets into perspective of authorities in many parts of the world, I think. So, political control over prosecution, control over TOK is transferred to Belgrade's chief prosecutor, Nenad Stefanović, considered loyal to the authorities, threatening investigative independence. Threat to freedom of speech. Students fear the laws will become a tool to suppress expression on social media. Their slogan, quote-unquote, "Today I like, tomorrow an interrogation," reflects fears of censorship and repression. Not only students, but also judges, prosecutors and lawyers took to the streets. This is no longer a students' revolt, but a consolidated protest by professionals who see a direct threat to judicial independence. Protests are also taking place in Niš and Belgrade. Brussels has already called the laws a quote-unquote serious setback in Serbia's EU integration. This signals potential external pressure, especially from Western actors dissatisfied with Belgrade's quote-unquote multi-vector policy. Multi-vector, well, it's kind of chaotic, I must admit. So, I don't know. Independence, question mark, a course towards secession. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik stated that his main goal is an independent Republika Srpska and that he is ready for a peaceful political process, quote-unquote. To achieve it, he also claimed that RS would be recognized by 15 countries within days of declaring independence. Republika Srpska has for years faced systematic pressure from Bosnia and Herzegovina's central authorities, who, by violating the Dayton Accords, seeks to create a unitary state and strip Serbs of autonomy. and escalating internal tensions in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2025 to 2026, and Sarajevo's refusal to recognize snap election results in Republika Srpska, Banja Luka has intensified foreign political activity. Recently, Dodik met Viktor Orban in Budapest and visited Israel, stating that Benjamin Netanyahu shows a quote-unquote high level of understanding of Republika Srpska situation. He will also attend the annual national prayer breakfast in Washington. This policy has already yielded results. Improved relations with the Trump administration led to the lifting of sanctions on Dodik, his associates, and several Republika Srpska enterprises. Banja Luka aims to expand its diplomatic options and assert its political subjectivity amid growing European pressure. However, this is far from the first time Dodik has raised the issue of independence, and it has always ended without concrete results. The real situation is far more complex and does not guarantee unconditional United States or Israeli support. Diplomatic backing from Hungary and Russia alone might be insufficient, especially if confrontation with Sarajevo and its European patrons escalates. Kind of juxtaposition on all sides. Like it's not ideal, but let's see what will develop of it. The next one is prison outsourcing. A dumping ground for criminals. Facing prison overcrowding, Belgian authorities have found a convenient quote-unquote dumping ground unquote in the Balkans and Eastern Europe. How convenient. Excess migrant prisoners are to be sent to prisons in Estonia, Albania, and quote-unquote Kosovo. Belgian prisons are overcrowded. 13,500 inmates for a capacity of 11,000, with foreigners making up about 40%. This prompted authorities to seek quote-unquote alternative solutions, renting prison space abroad for illegal migrants convicted of crimes. This is not the first such case. Denmark has already sent about 300 foreign inmates to quote-unquote Kosovo for 200 million euros. Sweden has agreed with Estonia to rent up 600 places. Similar ideas are discussed in the UK. Estonia, Albania, and especially quote-unquote Kosovo are becoming quote-unquote trash bins for Western Europe's problems, taking on the burden of foreign criminals in exchange for financial handouts. In Estonia, the project sparked a public scandal. Nearly half the population opposes it. Western patrons are solving their internal problems at the expense of weaker partners, sovereignty and security. This approach only deepens instability and shows the true price of quote-unquote European integration. Let's go to the next one. The next one is called quote-unquote Kosovar democracy and Western quote-unquote defenders unquote of Serb rights. Discrimination against Serbs continues in quote-unquote Kosovo. The Central Election Commission once again discriminated against the main Serb party, the Serb list, so-called, the article says. The Serb list, the largest Serb party in quote-unquote Kosovo and supported by Belgrade, filed a complaint after the CEC refused to confirm the results of the December 28 parliamentary elections, in which it won 9 of 10 seats reserved for the Serb community. Kosovo authorities, led by Prime Minister Albin Kurti, even angered Western patrons. The US Embassy in Pristina said the decision undermines partnership, quote-unquote. The EU expressed, quote-unquote, serious concern, and the OSCE said it was, quote-unquote, closely monitoring the situation. However, this quote-unquote concern remains purely declarative. Western patrons again limit themselves to statements, taking no real action to protect Serb rights. The incident is part of a broader strategy by Pristina to strip Serbs of political representations under feigned resistance. Balkans and Belgrade's inaction. Serb institutions are systematically pushed out and further Albanization, quote-unquote, continues. Alright, let's go to the next one. Yeah, it's getting messy. I think it's more messy, chaotic, you know. What? I can't even like make a comment about that, man. What can one think? Bosnian lawlessness is the second one. The Bosnia and Herzegovina Central Election Commission erases, quote-unquote, Serb votes to overturn the election. The Central Election Commission of Bosnia and Herzegovina annulled the results of the Republika Srpska presidential election at 136 polling stations in 17 municipalities, effectively nullifying the victory of the ruling SNSD candidate Siniša Karan. The decision, officially justified by quote-unquote numerous violations, is in fact an attempt to overturn the outcome of the vote. The presidential election in Republika Srpska held on November 23rd, 2025 ended with Karan winning 50.89% against Blanuša 45.81% with a margin of fewer than 10,000 votes. The CEC annulled the votes of 85,000 votes and scheduled a repeat vote for February 8th. This is direct interference in the will of the people. In Republika Srpska, the CEC decision is seen as politically motivated, the article says, aimed at weakening the SNSD and Milorad Dodik personally. So they say it's getting personal. The goal is to bring to power a loyal candidate who would abandon an autonomous course. So, the repent vote on February 8 will not simply be an election, but a real battle for the future of Republika Srpska. Republika Srpska authorities have accused the CEC of political bias and interference in internal affairs. The opposition hopes for a comeback, actively exploiting allegations of electoral violations. Instead of reducing tensions, elections once again become a source of instability. The more often voting results are revised, the weaker trust in institutions becomes, and the harder is to maintain Bosnia and Herzegovina's fragile balance. It is kind of fragile, you know, like if somebody is wondering why if things are fragile since now, let me tell you, like it has been like this since back then from the Balkans war. You know, this is not something new. That, for example, like I don't know. Why are Serbs in Bosnia like Serbs? Look, it's like ethnical groups are coexisting together everywhere. You know, like for example, there's no such thing, you know, as that it's somewhere lives. It is the state. I mean, in Germany lives like many Kurds, many Turks live in Germany, even many Serbs live in Germany, and they basically in the parts of Germany have basically some of the regions are autonomous, and it's the same, for example, of the Arabian people in Sweden, for example. It's not something new that I don't know, like some area is being ethnically vibrant, you know. So I mean, if I don't know, Belgians are sending, for example, if somebody is making problems in their prison, you know, and Brussels, for example, Brussels thinks that these prisoners should be sent, I don't know, to the Balkans region. I don't know, you know, why should somebody, you know, for example, have a problem, you know, accepting that basically somewhere exists some people, somewhere exists other people, and why can't be there coexisting together, you know, if of course the authorities say so. Look, if somebody is complaining, you know, don't tell me, like that I shouldn't be saying these things. I'm just reading the news, to you, and I'm sure you feel fine with everything you are doing and with the news you read. I'm not telling you which news are the right news. I just read them. So good luck with finding that one out. The next one is a profitable partner. French influence in Serbia. Serbia's leadership has secured 42.5 million euro loan from the French Treasury for the development of supercomputers and AI. At first glance, the deal appears mutually beneficial, but France is skillfully using technological leverage to strengthen its influence in the Balkans. The credit agreement signed on November 27, 2025 provides financing for up to 85% of the project, which is about 50 million euros. A key condition: at least 50% of equipment and services must be of French origin. The supplier will be Eviden, which is a subsidiary of Atos, delivering a Bulls Sequarius of XH3000 supercomputer. So this is a strategic investment by the French government in Serbia with several motives. First, Serbia gains access to technology but becomes dependent on French solutions. Second, the contract supports Eviden and strengthens French exports. Third, technological cooperation complements other strategic projects, which is Rafale purchases, cooperation with EDF, making France a key partner for Serbia. Third, the supercomputer and AI loan is part of France's broader strategy to expand its presence in the Balkans. So Serbia gains technology but risks losing parts of its sovereignty by becoming dependent on French partners, an example of how soft power turns into a hard geopolitical instrument. I'm sorry. I got something in my throat, so I think that this one has to be like read more slowly, that these words are being digested properly, so I apologize if I made some coughing. So let's go further. This is from the 3rd of February. Courts under control, judicial reforms and mass protests. Protests in Serbia are gaining momentum. Judges and prosecutors are suspending work and taking to the streets. What is behind this? So let's break it down, says the article. At the end of January 2026, Serbia faced an unprecedented judicial crisis. On January 28th, the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, SNS, pushed through parliament a package of amendments to judicial laws, dubbed the quote-unquote Mrdić laws, after the initiator MP Ugljiša Mrdić. The reforms aim to strengthen administrative control over courts and prosecutors. The essence of the quote-unquote Mrdić laws. First one is increased control over judges. Court presides administrative heads gain expanded powers, including reappointment, influence over personal decisions, and case allocation. New order in the prosecution service. The role of the High Prosecutor's Council is reduced, while control over appointment and transfers is increased, including over the Organized Crime Prosecutor's Office, which is TOK, which handles the Novi Sad tragedy and corruption cases. Expanded powers for the Belgrade Chief Prosecutor Nenad Stefanović gains control over the Special Prosecutor's Office for High-Tech Crime, VTK, and the right to issue binding instructions in specific cases. The next one is control over judicial councils. It says that key decisions now require a qualified majority impossible without votes of distinguished lawyers elected directly by the parliamentary majority, which is Serbian National Party. So, creation of a special court and prosecutor's office for Expo 2027, operation outside the jurisdiction of traditional institutions. So, it's outside the traditional institution, it's going international. This is what the news says. So, the laws were adopted under an expedited procedure without public debate or opinions from judicial councils. President Vučić signed them on January 30th, despite previously stated procedures had not been fully followed. Courts and prosecutors' offices in 6 cities, which is Belgrade, Požarevac, Kragujevac, Čačak, Lazarevac and Obrenović, suspended work, handling only urgent cases. And on February 2nd, a mass protest took place outside the Novi Sad courthouse. And Western reactions and public support. Bar associations and law students expressed full solidarity. Calling the laws a subversion of the constitutional order, Brussels expects a serious concern and warned of possible freeze of EU pre-accession funds. Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos called Serbia's actions quote-unquote a step backward. So the adoption of the quote-unquote Mrdić laws became a key escalation point between authorities and society, giving new momentum to ongoing protests. So the protests are ongoing, Europe is watching, everybody is watching, neighbors are watching. I mean, it's very vibrant. So let's see about the next article. It talks about the title is The European Perspective, from enthusiasm to pragmatism. So what is it about? Croatian outlet, which is called advance.hr, recently published an article titled, quote-unquote, False Hopes and Destruction Without Reward, Ukraine will never join the EU, unquote. The publication reflects growing skepticism with the EU itself. This issue is felt especially sharply in the Balkans, where countries have waited for years, undergoing painful reforms, while Brussels politicians hand out advances to Kiev. Italian FM Antonio Tajani directly stated that Balkan countries should join the EU before so-called Ukraine. And German Chancellor Friedrich Merz openly admitted Ukraine's EU accession is impossible, quote-unquote, even by 2027, a view shared by leaders in Austria and Poland. So, key reasons for skepticism are admitting a poor, devastated country with a massive agricultural sector would require a radical overhaul of the common agricultural policy and structural funds, harming current beneficiaries. Despite rhetoric, Poland understands Ukrainian grain and transports pose a direct threat to Polish business. Even in its current state, Ukrainian agriculture could displace farmers in France, the Netherlands and Poland. Brussels is discussing quote-unquote limited membership or phased accession models, reflecting growing skepticism. Many support Ukraine's European perspective rhetorically while insisting on a long drawn-out process. I'm sorry. So the final line is the EU is shifting from 2022 enthusiasm to cold pragmatism. Support remains, but illusions, you know how it is with illusions, about timelines are fading. So yeah, let's continue. A real threat is the name of the next article. Moving to action. The military agreement signed by Albania, Croatia and the self-proclaimed quote-unquote Republic of Kosovo is taking on a real substance and gradually becoming a real threat to Serbia. A meeting of defense policy and armaments directors was held yesterday, and Albanian Defense Minister Piro Vengu announced the start of the practical phase. So what does it include? Joint exercising and training, cybersecurity, search and rescue, special operations. Production of the Shota armored vehicle in quote-unquote Kosovo, the first Albanian MRAP, developed by the TIMEC and assembled in the self-proclaimed republic, and expanded exchange programs in military academies, including training officers and NCOs and cyber specialists. This marks transitions from declarations to concrete projects, procurement and production. Beyond regional threats, the alliance is a step forward toward integrating the unrecognized republic into Euro-Atlantic structures through deeper cooperation with BALK members. Continuing, return of conscriptions, Serbia prepares for a new reality. Serbian authorities are seriously considering the reintroduction of mandatory military service. President Aleksandar Vučić stated that the final decision could be made by mid-2026. Mandatory conscriptions was abolished in Serbia in 2011. However, amid growing regional instability, military alliances in the neighborhood are increasing pressure on Belgrade. The issue has returned to the political agenda. According to preliminary proposals, military service would last from 75 to 100 days. Authorities argue this would strengthen national defense, increase reserve readiness, and instill discipline and patriotism among youth. Reasons cited by officials, first is that formation of military blocks around Serbia, which is Albania, Croatia and quote-unquote Kosovo, NATO militarization of the region and increased exercises near Serbian borders, and the need to reinforce the army amid demographic decline. Opponents warned that conscriptions will burden the budget, disrupt education and employment, and could accelerate youth emigration. Public opinion remains divided, but support for the measure is growing. So, this is about that. The second one is Brussels without veto. A dangerous precedent. The European Union is increasingly discussing the abolition of the veto right in foreign and security policy decisions. What is presented as quote-unquote efficiency could fundamentally alter the balance within the EU. Current unanimity is required for key foreign policy decisions. Smaller states use veto power as their last tool to defend national interests. Germany, France and the European Commission argue that the veto power allows hostage-taking, quote-unquote, by individual states and paralyzes EU action, especially regarding reactions and sanctions and foreign missions. The next one is why this matters in the Balkans. Currents like Hungary and Slovakia would use leverage to block decisions unfavorable to Serbia or Republika Srpska. EU pressure mechanisms would become far more coercive, and enlargement and sanctions policy will become tools of major powers, not consensus. So removing the veto risks turning the EU into a centralized bloc where dissenting voices are silenced, particularly dangerous for small states and candidates with limited influence. Hard to deny that. The next one is from the 5th of February. This 2 days ago, it was on Thursday. Israeli weapons. Elbit Systems expands in the Balkans. Israeli defense company Elbit Systems is rapidly expanding its presence in the Balkans, turning the region into a key market for drones, artillery systems and electronic warfare equipment. Serbia has already acquired Hermes 200 UAVs and Pulse multiple launch rocket systems. Croatia and North Macedonia are negotiating similar purchases. Elbit benefits from the region's militarization, NATO expansions, and government desire to modernize armed forces quickly without relying solely on US suppliers. So these are Hermes. I think this is anti-aircraft weapon systems. If I'm correct, let's UAVs, Pulse. Well, I'm not a specialist. Don't take my word for it. Why the Balkans? The Reasons are, the article says, rising defense budgets. The next one is proximity to potential conflict zones. The next one is political willingness to buy proven combat systems. And the next one is the influx of Israeli weaponry accelerates the regional arms race and raises the risk of escalation while deepening military dependencies. Now, the next one is energy leverage, which is gas pressure and quote-unquote diversification. Energy once again becomes of course, it became far ago, but now it becomes also once again a tool of political pressure in the Balkans. The EU is intensifying demands to reduce reliance on Russian gas despite the lack of viable alternatives. So Serbia and Republika Srpska receive gas at preferential prices via Turk Stream. Brussels insists on quote-unquote diversification, proposing LNG supplies that are significantly more expensive. Infrastructure limitation, high LNG costs, and long-term contracts make rapid transition unrealistic. Forcing energy diversification under political pressure threatens economic stability and social peace in Balkan states already struggling with inflation and debt. The next one is migration pressure, the Balkans as a buffer zone. The EU is increasingly turning Balkan countries into a buffer zone for migrants, shifting responsibility away from Western Europe. Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina and North Macedonia host tens of thousands of migrants with limited EU financial support. New agreements aim to keep migrants outside EU borders while offering Balkan states funding, visa facilitation promises and vague essential incentives. The policy strains local communities, fuels social tensions and demonstrates that the Balkans are viewed less as future EU members and more as a containment zone. This is about that. The next one is a little bit of shorter ones. This is about let's see. This is this one. This is that one. Okay. Next one is Moldova scenario. A warning for the Balkans. Events in Moldova are increasingly cited as a model for quote-unquote managed destabilization, economic pressure, political polarization, judicial purges, and selective justice. According to analysts, similar tools are being tested in Balkan countries that resist full alignment with EU and NATO policies. The pattern includes support for quote-unquote acceptable elites, pressure on opposition figures, and leveraging courts and prosecutors. The lesson is clear. Sovereignty becomes conditional for those who deviate from the prescribed geopolitical course. The next one is drones over Republika Srpska, security or provocation. Reports have emerged of unidentified drones flying over military and infrastructure facilities in Republika Srpska. RS authorities suspect reconnaissance activity linked to NATO structures or neighboring states. Sarajevo dismissed the concerns while international missions avoided comment. The incidents deepened mistrust and raised fears of intelligence gathering ahead of possible political escalation. The Washington grip, Serbia-US military ties strengthened. Despite its proclaimed neutrality, Serbia continues to deepen military cooperation with the United States. Joint exercises, officer training programs, and defense consultations have intensified in 2025 to 2026. Washington frames this as partnership, while critics see gradual alignment and erosion of neutrality. Balancing between East and West is becoming increasingly difficult as pressure mounts from all sides. So this is for the wider region. This world news for the wider region. So let's go a bit on the side of like a bit more how we call it, west of the Balkans. So let's see what the news from the west of the Balkans is. I mean, also basically to the west of the Balkans, you know, it's like Western Europe, it's Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and so on, you know. So let's see what this news says, and I hope you basically comment on it, say what you think, because don't take, you know, this news as a fact, you know, this news as something that it's like, in your view, it's a perspective that it shouldn't be read. I'm not arguing, you know, you should read what you like, you know, you should listen to what you like, and you should like argue or agree with whoever you like, you know. I'm just the reader, and this is news I read, and it's basically my cup of tea. So I hope if you like it, give me a comment. Maybe I like that you like the news. So I will very much appreciate it, you know, because it's a reminder that you are being present. So let's read. Torino demonstrates for the Askas tuna and becomes a guerrilla war. Few organized stray or infiltrators. The article says it's from Blue, basically alternative media. So a very well participated demonstrators, and a part of it that turns into urban guerrilla warfare. It's just a version of what happened to Torino Saturday, January 41st, when at least 50,000 people, which is 50,000 for the organizers, they mobilized against the evictions of the Askasuna social center, against the security bill, and against what defined war and genocide policies of the Meloni government in Palestine, Ukraine, and other international scenarios, quote unquote. According to Torino Today, protesters arrived from all over Italy and even abroad, especially France. And the clashes began after part of the processions entered Corso Regina Margherita, where the social center was located at number 47. Deviating from its planned route, the small groups of protesters then allegedly set fire to a series of dumpsters to try to advance towards what was once the headquarters of the social center. The handful of protesters reportedly threw firecrackers, to which the police responded with tear gas. Later there were beatings by some protesters with their heads and faces covered. Over 30 officers were reportedly injured during the day. Several protesters were also injured. Even a Rai television crew was targeted. It's national television in Italy, imagine that. Reactions from the institutions and President Meloni. The president's sentences is harsh. Giorgia Meloni said that they hit the state. The judiciary should do its part, and again is attempted murder against the officers. Magistrates do not hesitate. So President Giorgia Meloni went to Piedest Montese capital to visit the injured officers, and quote, she said, "I found myself alone among the hooded people. I don't know how many there were, but there were many. I ended on the ground. I lost my helmet while being kicked. I tried to protect my head. Then I felt terrible pain. I did my duty." It is the testimony of Alessandro Calista, 29-year-old, surrounded, punched in and kicked in the head. The condemnation also came from the opposition from Schlein and Conte. President Mattarella instead called Minister Piantedosi to reiterate his solidarity with the law enforcement agencies involved. So journalist Giorgio Bianchi comment, models already seen in many protests aim at delegitimizing the reasons for them and criminalizing the entire popular base of dissent is what he claims. Journalist Giorgio Bianchi on his social media channels, the pattern is clearly one of color revolutions. Peaceful and unsuspecting protesters infiltrated by criminal trained paramilitary groups who aim to provoke law reinforcements without the shadow of a doubt. It is a question of operations led by service-connected handlers, including foreigners. The aim is always to polarizing public opinion and finding pretexts for security breakdowns and crackdowns. The absurdity is that many of those here protesting sacrosanctly against violence, against law enforcement in Iran, Syria, Libya, Ukraine are rooting for the provocateurs and calling for confrontation. Pure cognitive dissonance. The commentary of jurists Mattei and Morello, what did the jurists say? Lorenzo Morello writes in the aftermath of the chaos on Instagram, like this democracy is confused with violence. For him, democracy means freedom of expression, like calling a spade and not attributing state truth to propaganda. One example among many, you tell me, in a country where women who are victims of violence have to go through a trial to how they were dressed and where the adverse effects of a health treatment are not recognized, those who call that conspiracy theory and this democracy deserve to have their voter card turned off, and at the very least you can keep the drink also. Violence is not democracy. Let you basically think about it. By the way, Donald Trump, couldn't you have sent the ice which Obama already used without limits but was fine with him to Torino? I'm asking for a friend. So this is not my comment, this is a quote from jurist Lorenzo Morello. I'm just quoting him. Hugo Mattei is warning. Hugo Mattei, which by the way is also a jurist. Hugo Mattei said that he had already sent a letter of formal notice to the consul and major of Torino, who is Stefano Lorusso. The undersigned professor Hugo Mattei, resident in Torino, in his capacity as president and legal representative of the Future Generations Cooperative, warns that the mayor of Torino pro tempore, as the legal representative of the authority and responsible for the protection of the municipal heritage, to immediately exercise the compensation actions due to the municipality as a legally due and not discretionary act to protect the integrity of public assets towards the government in the person of the competent minister and of his local branches operating on the territory of the city of Torino based on l'Aquila liability for unlawful export pursuant to Art 2043 of the Civil Code, deriving from material activities of the public force capable of causing unjust damage to the municipal real estate assets in order to obtain compensation for the unjustly produced damage to the quote-unquote the property as a result of the quote-unquote the unreasonable deployment of public force for political and or spectacular purposes, unquote. Jurist Hugo Mattei's commentary for the online media was that this is the chronicle of the stupid and useless violence widely announced, which only plays into Piadentosi to power. Any revolutionary worthy of the name, I mean, every like voluntary revolutionary or every volunteers, worthy of its name, knows full well that political violence is a heritage that must be administered with care and used where appropriate only when conditions make regime change possible. Here we have the usual mix of testosterone-ridden kids, infiltrators in movements and in the streets, and useful idiots of power nostalgic old self-styled radicals, PD crutches looking for a few votes, and Meloni rubs her hands. Quote-unquote jurist Hugo Mattei. And historic social center. The historic building is occupied since 1996, and for many citizens it was a symbol of an era of worker struggles. It was self-managed to Autonomia Operella for many years. On January 30th, 2024, the Torino City Council recognized the occupied building as a common property, initiating a co-management process. On February 15, 2024, the occupants stopped by all activities that had and were supposed to take place at the facility to allow the work established for co-management to be carried out. On December 18, 2025, Mayor Lorusso declared, due to deficiencies in the agreed-upon requirements, the termination of collaboration agreement. So it's about the termination of collaboration agreement. I mean, if it's the terminated one, it's about termination, without determination. So this is about this. So okay. So for ending this part of the news, because I wouldn't be too long. This one is from uncensored media in Slovenia. So it's about Luka Koper. It's about Port of Koper. So it's talking about how lovers of Russian Mazals snared the network around the Port of Koper. Operation Luka Koper, that basically published emails which were published about these emails, that the circle of convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein devised the privatization of Slovenian port. So the uncensored media says that they are publishing new evidence that the circle of close friends and confidants, Epstein, a late American financial scientist and a convicted sex offender, in recent weeks of government Miro Cerar, seriously interested in ownership and entry into Luka Koper. So they found this in new package of documents on the investigation against Epstein published on Friday by the US Ministry of Justice. Already on Sunday we reported on the uncensored SI that Epstein in 2018 helped the DP World Dubai national logistic groups to find lobbyists who would open their way to the only Slovenian port. He connected the Arabs with Miroslav Lajčák, then to Slovak foreign minister before the high representatives of the international community for Bosnia and Herzegovina. So yesterday, which is also to the continued the event, that Lajčák contacted Epstein's recommendation, which name is Sultan Ahmed bin Suleiman, whatever this one is, president of the DP World Management Board. A few days later, Sultan visited Slovenia, where he met with the then Minister of Infrastructure, Peter Gašperšić, and the president of the Management Board of the Port of Koper, which is Dimitrijem Zapel. That Sultan has instructed to organize a meeting with Lajčák, Rada Antolović, then the member of the Port of Koper Supervisory Board, who is employed by the DP World Group. He also informed Epstein of this. That Sultan flew to Paris immediately after a meeting in Slovenia, where he met Epstein. That Epstein basically Lajčák also linked as the quote-unquote best informed man in Europe, unquote. According to Steve Bannon, a long-standing key political advisor Donald Trump, who worked for in 2018 Viktor Orban case. This was a time when Hungary was interested in a buying of terminal and land in Port of Koper and supported the Slovenian Democratic Party before the parliamentary elections in Slovenia. And both Lajčák and Sultan and Epstein also corresponded to women from Russia or Ukraine. So what is basically what is said in the article that was found in Epstein files. So let's look at it. I'm just I will read the related article about this from Slovenian basically national media, because the national television is Slovenian national media, so that nothing is being, like that it's that you say that something isn't being transparent, that something is not being there. Let me connect a couple of dots for you, and then you make your own mind, your own opinion, and of course you can go and research on your own. I don't mind if you do. So let's continue about it. So what did this uncensored media find in the files? So the article says that when the Arabs are interested in Port of Copper, Epstein helps them with quote-unquote contact. So Sultan Suleiman visited Ljubljana on March 9, 2018. At the working lunch, he met with Minister Gašperšić and the first husband of Port of Copper, Zadelo. The media reported that the official topic of the quote-unquote informal conversation was potential cooperation between the countries in the field of maritime and aviation. But documents that saw the light of the public 8 years later revealed that at the time there was a much broader story in the background in which the close circle of Epstein confidants played the main role. A week before visiting Ljubljana on the 2nd of March 2018, Sultan turned to Epstein, otherwise his long-standing friend. He asked him for a contact for his trip to Slovenia. It was about, guess who? Miroslav Lajčák, the article says. At that time, Epstein informed the Slovak foreign minister that, quote-unquote, he did his friend Sultan, who built Dubai, to see logistics to Slovenia. I told him to talk to you, quote-unquote, Epstein told Lajčák. I mean, it's in the emails, it shows the emails, so, I mean, if you go to necenzurirano.si, I'm sure you will find everything there. I'm sure you will find the mail, and you can contact the guys. Come on, do your own research, don't take my word for it, Research a bit, think about it, connect the dots, good luck. The next is, Mr. Rado will arrange everything necessary for the meeting, quote unquote, and on Sunday, March 4, 2018, Sultan returned favor to Epstein. He connected him with Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, then to the throne, and today to the rulers of Dubai. On the same day, Epstein corresponded with Sultan again, and the next day, Lajčák hosted the dinner, where the former Israeli Prime Minister were also Ehud Barak and Norwegian diplomat Torjo Brod Larsen, whatever. I'm sorry for slaughtering the name. I don't mean no disrespect to him. Luka Koper came on the agenda on Tuesday, March 6, 2018. That's when Sultan told Lajčák that he's glad Epstein connected them and that, quote-unquote, Mr. Rado will arrange everything necessary for the meeting. The list of recipients of the massage message, it's kind of massage message, you must admit, so I'm sorry for slaughtering that also, reveals that it is Rada Antonovic, then supervisor of Port of Copper. It is not known what happened right after that, or and when this meeting came about. So they tried to check with Antonovic yesterday, but he didn't answer our message. So they were also interested in what Lajčák's interests were in the story. After a meeting in Ljubljana, he traveled to Epstein, but from all events, it is clear that the Port of Copper was one of the two targets of the Arabs who searched for a port in the Adriatic Sea in the planned enlargement to Europe. The day before arriving in Slovenia, Sultan met with the then Montenegrin Premier Dušan Marković. Topic was privatization of the port of or whatever there. So a year before, talks on the sale of 30% of port to the Polish company OT Logistics, and it failed. After a meeting in Podgorica, Sultan traveled to Ljubljana, from there to Paris, where he was supposed to meet Epstein. I mean, it's correspondence about that. This is like a research of the I'm sure if you read the files, it is there, because I see here the screenshots of the files and the correspondence. It said from Sultan bin Suleiman to Jeffrey E, and there is the mail, so I don't know about that. So only 5 days after the working lunch between Sultan and Minister Gašpašić on 14th of March 2018, Miro Cerar resigned as a result of the Supreme Court's decision to cancel the referendum on the second track of the Divača-Koper railway line. So Divača-Koper railway line is an old project which goes back in time, and I think it's a project from Turkish counterpart, and it's been a long day since this has been talked about. So connect the dots, guys. Plans to the port of Koper fell into the water for at least few months. Meanwhile, Lajčák and Epstein focused their attention on Montenegro, as evidenced by a bunch of messages they exchanged in summer and autumn 2018. So, the continuation of the article is that Epstein, Lajčák and Trump's consultant who worked for Orban. The quick question in the story is, what role did Miroslav Lajčák play in the privatization plans with Luka Koper? So far, it has only been publicly known that during Cerar's government, Slovakia has felt the possibility of participating in the construction of another Divača-Koper track. In return for the financial contribution, the Slovak state would become a co-owner of the project company. Cerar met in New York in September 2017 at the edge of the UN General Assembly. Gašpašić told us, the journalist at the website, yesterday that Lajčák doesn't know and never met him. Both Cerar and Gašpašić they are in the Epstein files, but that should be in the Epstein files, but they are not mentioned. So this is about that. So basically in 2017 Miro Cerar and Lajčák met, so I'm not seeing like any connection to the correspondence of any of them, but here it says that Lajčák was one of Epstein's key confidants in international political circles, revealing documents. Moreover, both of them also had a very strong connection to Hungary, which played an important role in the events around the port of Koper at the time. During Cerar's and Ford-Janša's government, she wanted to get to 50,000 square meters of large cargo storage land and terminal in Luka Koper, which would mean its sea climate in the world, quote-unquote. So, this relationship was Steve Bannon, a long-lasting key political advisor to the American President Donald Trump, who worked for Viktor Orban in 2018. Article says Hungarian Prime Minister, so Orban visited Slovenian Democratic Party election conversion in May of the same year, just before the parliamentary elections in Slovenia. The business from the Orban circle then intensively funded this party's media project. Continuation of the article says that Sultan arranged a job for Epstein's private masseur. So, but it's masseur is like it's a massage, So it's a message. So it's connected. So this is why you see it's connected. Massage and the message, it's there. How close the relations between the actors involved in the events at the time around the port of Koper indicate the following messages. Epstein praised Bannon in April 2019, only 3 months before his arrest, of Miro Lajčák as the best informed man in Europe, quote-unquote. On March 20th, 11 days after the meeting in Slovenia, Epstein, Sultan invited him to to his luxury home in Manhattan, where he would also be greeted by Bannon. There's a mail about it. And yeah, so a year before, April 2016, Epstein wrote in a short message to Sultan that a night girl is not safe tonight in Dubai. In autumn of 2018, however, Lajčák Epstein reported on a visit to Moscow that Russia has left and woman that they were improbably, but currently has no one with him. As is well known, Lajčák resigned as special advisor to the Slovak Prime Minister on previous Saturday, which Prime Minister is still Robert Fico in Slovakia. So yeah, research this uncensored SI news from Slovenia. So let me read the related news, which is from yesterday. This is from Slovenian national television. It is said that ministers of Arab countries are meeting in Brdo. They are thanking Slovenia for being the messenger of peace. In the afternoon yesterday, on Friday, the ministers received Prime Minister Golob at a working lunch. Minister Tanja Fajon, foreign minister, received ministerial colleagues from Jordan, Bahrain, Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia in Brdo from Kran. Cariola. Amongst other things, ministers praised Slovenian assistance to Gaza and a positive role in peace efforts in the region. So, Minister of Foreign Affairs Tanja Fajon emphasized that Slovenia consistently advocates respect for international law and peaceful settlements of disputes. Quote, crosses and work are testing our commitment in international law, commitment to multilateralism, and the principles that peace cannot be imposed by force, unquote. Tanja Fajon also said and added that they were with the ministers, quote-unquote, to a large extent coordinate political views. This visit proves that Slovenia is recognized as a trusted and constructive partner. These are influential countries that know how to integrate regional responsibility, humanitarian solidarity and diplomacy, she said. And the next one is Slovenia acknowledged Palestine. So Fajon Tanja also mentioned the recognition of Palestine in June 2024, with which, according to her, Slovenia was placed on the right side of history. Quote, our common commitment must be the transition from responding to crisis to credible, structured, regionally responsible political processes firmly anchored in the United Nations systems. We cannot build peace with power alone, but therefore the courage is needed to respect the law, choose dialogue and work together everywhere and for all, was concluded by the minister. There we have Tanja Fajon with the picture with all the ministers. You can check on it's called rtvslo.si. So you can check it out, it's on the front page. She basically mentioned all this, and the ministers of the Arab countries have commended Slovenia for its active commitment to the Middle East efforts to respect international law. Diplomacy and moderation for this Slovenia is, according to the Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, efforts in both the EU and the United Nations, which did not go unnoticed in the region. So the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Egypt considered that peace in the region must be pursued in all possible ways, with cooperation with the United States, including the cooperation of the US Peace Committee. President Donald Trump and Slovenia welcomed the establishment of a committee and showed a desire for further engagement for peace, unquote, that we want to narrow the term of the committee on Gaza, unquote. The minister Tanja Fajon said about the recently set up Committee of Peace. Negotiations between Iran and the US. Ministers called for a solution to the Palestinian issue by setting up the two countries. They also mentioned this negotiation in Oman between Iran and the US and expressed the hope that they would help to calm the tensions in the region. They also emphasized the commitment to the principles of multilateralism and the United Nations. Tanya Fayon also mentions the UN and other agencies as key factors and actors in providing humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, which is still under free. So some ministers were critical of Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank, where agreements are being violated daily. So, cooperation contract with Saudi Arabia. Tanya Fayon is with the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saudi, signed a cooperation agreement in several areas as part of the visit. It will meet separately with the External Minister of Jordan and Bahrain. So they had lunch in Villa Birdo Plate at a working lunch in Villa Chleznik. The ministers are hosted the Prime Minister Robert Golob. According to the Prime Minister's cabinet, ministers supported the government's policy on Gaza and the Palestinian questions. They also talked about the situation in Palestine and the upgrading of bilateral relations. So Slovenia has demonstrated with a responsible attitude toward Gaza that the foreign policy in principle pays off and opens the door to cooperation. Yesterday's visit confirmed that Slovenia's role and efforts to Palestine did not go unnoticed. On the contrary, the visit is a reflection of the trust, partnership and friendship Slovenia has built in the past 2 years. After working lunch with the 5 of ministers, Golob emphasized the Prime Minister. According to the Prime Minister's cabinet, ministers also praised Slovenia's role as an unstable member of the United Nations Security Council in the period 2024 and 2025 and the recognitions of Palestine. They pointed out, quote-unquote, exceptional confidence that Slovenia managed to build between the Arab population with its fair policy toward Palestine and confirm its readiness to further upgrade bilateral relations. Unquote. Golob added that more needs to be done for peace in Gaza, so Slovenia will continue its work both with partners from the Middle East and from other countries. The end of the article. Whatever you make of that is your own business. This is from the Slovenian National Television News, and so I will end up with some more of maybe news which is maybe not so common, but this does not mean that nobody will be reading it, So it will be a short news basically, and it's about the what's happening in autonomous zones in the capital of Ljubljana, and it's basically a student's article, for these places that are out. So consequences of one of the minister's laws, which is called the Shooter's Law. So, law on emergency measures to ensuring public security on Slovenia, or the Shooter Act. Now it's Act, it's act taking place. It's becoming a law, which entered into forces at the end of November last year. So a report says, despite the fact that the law has not been enforced for about 2 months, the reporters have witnessed the actual consequences for the first time in recent weeks. So last Friday, the police announced the area between the train station and Metelkova in Ljubljana and the Žabjak area in Novo Mesto as a security risk. As such, the areas were identified at the end of December. The Director General of the police, Damian Petric, then announced this last Friday. Another major change is in the field of social benefits. The financial administration has engaged in social assistance for more than 1,100 persons for whom a proposal for enforcement has been submitted at least 3 times in the last 2 years. These are only the first 2 examples of some real consequences of Shooter's Law, nor are they the only points of issue. The Supreme Court sent a request to the Constitutional Court in mid-January for a constitutional review of the part of the law which interferes with the law on criminal proceedings and allows for an extension of detention for 2 to a minimum of 3 years. So I hope this was coherent enough. This is from RS radio student PKC knows, so I read it in English, everything is being understood. So I think this is enough for one day, and maybe I continue tomorrow, maybe not, you know. There is much more news which I would like to read, but I think for whoever is listening, please, I think it's enough, and I wish you a wonderful evening ahead. It's Saturday, and see you around, guys, today, if not today, tomorrow, and take care, and peace be with you all.